there's something that I call the 5 pillars in DRO, and they used to be 4, but now it's 5 because with express integration, there's an additional component that I want to hit on. But the reason I call them the 5 pillars is that if you can keep these 5 pillars in line and balanced with each other when you're setting up your routes and you're deciding which stops am I going to have sorted to which of my trucks to go out today, if you can keep these 5 things balanced with each other, you're going to not only optimize your resource efficiency in terms of stops per hour, stops per mile, things like that, but you're going to optimize your fuel as well. So the 5 pillars are these. You've got truck capacity. You've got the projected miles for the route. You've got the projected hours for the route. You've got the total stops. And then you have the time commit packages or time commits, whether that's pickups or deliveries. So those things, if you can keep all those metrics in line with each other, if you have a full truck, you've got a stop count that you know the driver can handle without working too few hours, right? You want them to work at a healthy, fast pace, but you don't want to overload them either. And if you can give them a good amount of hours and miles to run, if you keep all those things in balance, and you know your CSA well enough, you keep all those things in balance, you're going to have a good line item when it comes to the fuel on your P&L sheet. And it's just because this is the FedEx has already done those calculations. And when they look and they see you should run your territory in, 6 routes, 7 routes, 10 routes, 20 routes, whatever it is, right? They've already factored in the fuel piece. And if you can keep those 5 things in line, you'll be getting very close, if not exceeding the metrics that FedEx has set for your business to be profitable, including in the area of fuel. Now, there's a couple of things specifically I want to hit on when we talk about DRO and setting up your routes. Designing your CSA to run profitably from a fuel efficiency perspective, you want to make sure that you keep your routes contiguous to each other. In other words, a driver, the streets that they cover are all going to generally be in the same clustered area. You don't want drivers, leapfrogging over each other, going to different areas of your CSA, jumping over others, coming back around. That's obviously, that's something we know intuitively is not productive. It's not efficient. So you want every driver running an area of stops that are tightly clustered together. So keep them contiguous. And if you have somebody that is, you have one type of route that's adjacent to another type of route, you want to make sure that you keep, in general, you want to keep your residential stops kind of clustered on one route, your big industrial type stops clustered on another type of route, and then your really rural stops, you want to keep those sequestered on their own kind of route. Now, there's a million different types of CSAs because everyone is unique. But in general, if you can keep your trucks in the type of area that is best suited to them, you're really going to have a more optimized route plan, and you're going to see gains on your efficiency, your fuel efficiency as well. Now, another thing is when you go into DRO and you set up the trucks for their capacity, you can set up custom numbers. So if you have a weird size truck, like you have something that's technically a P700 on paper, for example, but it's an old box truck that's got a weird setup. It's got shelves down one side, but not the other. You can set custom capacities for those trucks. And the reason I bring that up is if you get a truck set up the correct way with the correct capacity, that lets you, remember, capacity is one of the 5 pillars, that lets the rest of those building blocks fall into place. So keeping the routes contiguous and adjacent with each other and setting up the capacity of each truck correctly, these are 2 big things you can do to really help the fuel efficiency of your routes. Now, another thing to remember is if you have a piece of software that allows your drivers to reorder their stops before they go out and deliver them. So Ground Cloud, for example, if you have the ability to go in there and set up, okay, I'm going to do zone 1 where I'm going to start here, then I'm going to do zone 2, then I'm going to move over here, zone 3. If the drivers have full customization of that, then you need to be extra careful and you need to monitor that and see what their miles are each day compared to what DRO says is possible for them to run that route in. Now, sometimes they're going to be able to do it better than DRO, but a lot of times they're going to do it based on the way that they are the most comfortable with. And that's not always going to be the most efficient way to run the route. So if you have rural territories, I know I see some people on here that I personally know that do have rural areas, the metric you want to look at is not stops per hour. That's a good one to look out for your tight city routes, right? Your residential routes where there's, neighborhoods and you got your heavy hitters that are going in, knocking out 30, 35, 40, 45 stops an hour. Excuse me. You want to look at stops per mile. And if you're getting a low return on your stops per mile on your country routes, you need to go in and look and see why that's the case. Now, again, it might be something where you can optimize it better on DRO, or it could be an issue of your driver is setting up the route on their own in a way that is less efficient than the way it could be run. So you need to be aware of those variables when you're looking at your rural routes. Again, keep the right kinds of trucks on the right kinds of routes. Typically your step vans, your bigger step vans are really going to get some of the poorest fuel economy of any of the sizes and types of vehicles out there. So if you have very rural routes, not only does it not make sense to put bigger step vans on those kind of routes from a safety perspective, but they're getting the worst fuel mileage and you're putting them on high mileage routes. So that doesn't make sense. So if you are looking into a business and you're not sure if the fleet is well suited for that kind of route, that kind of territory, that is one thing that I have done for different contractors to say, hey, you might need to look at replacing this P700 with an extended high top transit or vice versa, right? We do that kind of fleet analysis here at Route Consultant. That's something we'd be glad to help you with if that's something that you're wanting, if you're looking at a business and you're not sure the trucks are optimized for the routes. We usually talk about that in terms of capacity, but it also works on the miles and the stops per mile that you're trying to get more out of. And you're looking at a business and you're like, I just don't think these trucks are suited. We can help you figure that out. Now, a couple more things on this real quick in terms of fuel efficiency. You need to explain to your drivers what kinds of behaviors they may have that contribute to poor fuel economy. So these are going to be things like hard braking, hard acceleration, hard cornering, speeding. These are the big four that are really going to contribute to poor fuel economy. And one thing that we did at Patent Logistics was we would have a competition amongst our drivers every so often, and it would say, okay, whoever has the best fuel economy this week gets a $50 gift card to Outback or wherever it is, right? You can have fun little competitions, but make sure you coach your drivers beforehand so they know what to not do when they go out and compete with each other. You don't just want to turn them loose and not tell them how to have better fuel economy. So coach them and then keep them accountable. And the nice thing is your vetter systems are already looking for these behaviors. So if you're not familiar, this is a little pro tip for vetter in case you didn't know. Your video event data recorders, your cameras in your trucks watching your drivers, those cameras are going to get triggered for one of these four kinds of events. So there's a little G-force sensor inside the camera. And if you do a hard corner, hard braking, hard acceleration, and that G-force sensor gets tripped inside of that camera, it's going to cause that camera to come on and start a recorded event of your driver. And whatever behavior they had that led up to it, whether they're distracted, just, for whatever reason it is, right? It's also going to catch if they're not wearing their seatbelt. But in terms of what you're trying to target for fuel economy, the vetter is already going to be looking at those things from a safety perspective. So there's some nice overlap there that you can rely on your technology and leverage that to your advantage when you're trying to improve that. Then the last thing I want to say on fuel efficiency is there's a lot of companies out there that have really, really good telematics, stuff that plugs right into your OBD2 port on your vehicles that'll tell you right there from the truck itself how much fuel economy you're getting. And then you can coach your drivers from there. You can see if there's codes being thrown. Telematics, they do so many things these days, but fuel economy is one of the really good things that they offer. So if you don't have a solution like that, or you'd like something like that, contact us here at Route Consult. We can tell you some of the vendors to use for that. So that's fuel efficiency. Now, the other big thing is it doesn't matter if you have the best fuel efficiency if your drivers are unscrupulous and stealing that fuel from you. Now, this is something that a lot of contractors have dealt with. We've certainly dealt with it at Patent Logistics. And there's a few things you can do to really help yourself avoid this. Number one is have a really solid handbook policy around this. If you suspect any kind of wrongdoing or you think that this might happen, you need to have something already in writing in your handbook, your employee agreement, that your drivers can sign beforehand that you can hold them accountable to. So if it's something that you're not sure if drivers may know if they're stealing fuel or not, you might think, well, how do they not know? Well, let me give you an example. In some terminals, and this is not a lot of terminals, but in some cases, drivers take their trucks home at night. So this would be for your more rural territories. Your drivers may take the truck that they use to deliver packages. They may live out in your service area. So they might drive it in the morning, get the packages loaded up, and then finish their route and go home after they finish their route. They might decide on their way home, they're going to stop at the local grocery store a couple miles out of the way and get groceries and fill up at the same time. Now, if you're watching them on their ground cloud path, if they're still logged in, or if you have onboard telematics, you can tell this truck is in service and it's going way off the path that they should be going for their routes. That would be fuel theft. Now, they may not be aware of that, it might not be malicious, but that's something that you need to keep an eye on. And you need to have a payback plan for your honest drivers that just made an honest mistake. And then also have a policy for those who are just trying to get away with it under the radar. Now you're like, I can't keep an eye on all 15, 20, however many drivers I have. I can't watch them all at the same time. Well, guess what? It's a lot easier than you think. Drivers are creatures of habit. So they all have their favorite stop and shop, their favorite UDF, their favorite Shell station, wherever it is. They always stop at the same one at the same time, typically, each day that they drive. So it makes it pretty easy to track their path and their typical habits. If you take a couple days on your routing software and you follow their path, you're going to see they're doing that day in, day out. And if they're going off if they deviate from their normal path, where they should be going in order to get to their first stop or coming back from their last stop, and they're going way out of their way, you can see exactly where they're going. And if it's, outside of work hours, they've already logged out of their scanner, you can check all these things and check them against each other to say, this guy was already logged out. He didn't log out of ground cloud, and he stopped at this gas station over here, and the fuel expenditure was way higher than normal. Or he bought diesel as opposed to gasoline, or vice versa, right? That tells you that they had somebody else meet them at the station and fueled up their secondary car, and they got back in their truck and drove to the station. There's a number of things that you can look for, but having a good routing software that you can track their path is going to be really important. Now, the last thing here is going to be having a good piece of technology that keeps the cards assigned or even physically close to the truck. A lot of contractors use an option that's a little lockbox on the side of the truck with a little string attached to it that you can attach the fuel card to. It's got like a 6 or 8 foot elastic string. They open up the little lockbox, they can pull it out, swipe the card, and then let it go back in the lockbox and close it up. So that keeps it safe from other people who don't know the lockbox code, and it keeps the driver themselves from taking the fuel card away from the truck. And the final thing I'll say on this is, when you're assigning personal identification numbers, the PIN numbers for these cards, keep your cards assigned to the truck. Don't let your drivers take them home. Keep the card assigned to a truck and have a specific spot on or in the truck that the car needs to stay. And then assign the PIN number that can work on any card. Assign the PIN number to the driver. Some people do that opposite. They assign a PIN to the truck so that whatever driver comes in and drives that truck uses that PIN assigned to the truck. Not a good idea if you're trying to monitor which driver is stealing fuel from you. Assign your PINs to your drivers and assign the cards to the truck. So these are best practices for better fuel efficiency and avoiding fuel theft.